criticize, let alone myself. And so I'll just tell you a few of my thoughts about what you wrote. So just what is going on here, it's like a reflection on Oliver's methodology, or at least the way he thinks that a good economic analysis should be conducted, perhaps any analysis. And I tried to break it down to a few requirements. So what does Oliver wants us to do? He wants us, or economists, he wants us to face reality, which means to forego simplifying assumptions, as economists so often use, and stop using perhaps cute models that are very nice to play with, but do not contribute much in the real world. And also, he wants us to provide rich and thick analysis. Most often, such analysis must be perhaps interdisciplinary. Finally, we must be at the end of one process. We must be self-critical. At least this is what I understood from what you wrote. So, and of course, Berg himself has a great piece of work, of analysis. His work on the diamond industry and in the diamond industry. And he is a faithful student of Oliver. And he really meets all these requirements by speaking about his special industry and especially about the ethical role in regulating and driving what's going on there. So this is a marvelous piece. So, and he met all these criteria. And next I try to think if I did the same in the way that I work. And I'm not so sure about the answer. And I have an example from about 2 weeks ago. It's not really a paper, but it is an analysis that I conducted. And I did that because one of the students came to me and he wrote me a newspaper article about a very recent Israeli Supreme Court case. This was the article. Because some of you cannot read Hebrew, I will try to explain what is going on here. So this nice guy with a stylish haircut is just it, and he understands corporate law and tries to innovate and release decisions. So I read the first the newspaper article and the decision itself, and it talks about it's a small, closely held company with 2 brothers, and they had a conflict over the management of the company. Nothing that can be solved and continue to work together. And what happens in this type of cases is that the court usually separates between the parties by asking one of them to purchase the part of the other. And the main question is who is going to buy whose share and for how much. So these are the questions. There are a few ways to handle this problem of the remedy. And quite often the courts ask both sides to hand over closed envelopes with valuation of for the company. And the ones that has the highest bid wins and has to buy the share of the other party for the valuation that he wrote, the higher valuation that he wrote in the elevator. But here, there was something innovative that Justice Amit said, and well, it's the same envelope system, but and the winner is simply just as the usual case. The winner is the ones that made the higher bid, but the purchase price is going to be based on the valuation of the other brother, the lower valuation. So just to give you an example,
Mirror image the usual thing.
Okay, so if one brother wrote 100 million and the other 90 million, the winner is going to be the one who wrote the 100 million, and he has to buy the share of the brother based on the valuation, but not the 100 valuation, but rather the 90 valuation. And what's the idea behind this innovation, which is an innovation? The idea is that if we think about the regular envelope system, the fear is that the regular system would become a guessing game. Each party might not write his own valuation. Certainly no one would write any price above the reservation price. But each of them tries to guess what the other is going to write and tries to top it by a bit. So no one writes necessarily his own valuation, but thinking of guessing what's the valuation of the other side, tries to top it up. And because of this guessing game, there might be a mistake. No one is mistaken about his own reservation price, but there might be a mistake about the brother. And because there is, of course, asymmetric information. And because this is a guessing game, it might end up in an inefficient outcome that with low bids, And it's even possible that the one that wins this auction is the one with the lower valuation, which means the company may end up in the hands of the one that values it less. And yes, you can say, well, of course, now there can be Cozy bargaining. They can go out of the room and bargain and move the company to the hands of the ones that values it more. But if there was Cozy bargaining and no transaction cost, so sure enough, they would not enter the court in the first place. So don't count on it. So Justice Sami understood that there might be an inefficient outcome, and he decided on this system. And I explained that to the students, and then I told my students that I don't see anything really innovative here. Why? Because there are other courts that have to handle the same situation of brothers or, doesn't matter, two sides that have some long-standing dispute. And what the other courts, the more theatrical courts, what they do is that they conduct a real auction in the courtroom. This is something that happened before in the Israeli system. It's like a Sotheby's auction, or it's called an English auction. And there, the court says an initial low price, perhaps 70 million, because he's sure that the company is worth more than that. He asks the brothers who wants to top the bid. So one of them says 80 and 90, and where does this process stops? It stops just a bit above the valuation of the second highest bidder, right? Because here, the brother that has a real valuation of 90 cannot continue bidding, so his brother tops it by a bit and wins over this contest. So I told my students, well, this seems like a very cute and innovative mechanism designed to solve the problem of the guessing game, but why didn't they simply use this English auction system that other courts do without making a real fuss about it, because these two systems are identical. So I ended, this discussion, and I brought up to class something that relevant and innovative, and I was happy with myself because I gave them like a smart answer. And then I went to go and read, Barak's paper with Oliver's requirement of a good analysis. And I thought to myself, did I meet this criteria? Did I face reality, or did I use some simplifying assumption? Did I provide a rich and thick analysis, a realistic analysis, and was I self-critical? Unfortunately, I had to answer no to all these three questions. I imagined, these brothers.
But now you're second-order self-critical.
And maybe it's all fiction, So, I imagined these two brothers in the courtroom with an English auction, and they don't like each other that much, and they're jealous, and there is like a lot of energy in the air. Am I sure that the bidding game would end up like this sterile envelope system in which they sit at home with their advisors and think about what's the reservation price, what can they do with the company? So I was not so sure that the result would be identical as I told my students. So this is me. And now what I want to do, if I still have a few minutes, I wanted to look at Carnegie Mellon, their top scholars, and to see if they met Oliver's challenge, or did they suffer from a few flaws like I did myself. And before I want to do this trick, I confess that I surely understand the critique, the sharp critique that Oliver Williamson had about economic analysis and the economic research back in those days, or the 1960s perhaps, maybe meant that period. And I did not study economics in the US in the 1960s, but I did study law and economics in the 1990s. And they say that whatever happens in economics happens after 20 or 30 years in law and economics. So I think I should get it right. And I was in the classroom of this young Louis Kaplow, and I was not there only by myself, but Barak was there as well with me. And Oren Bardillo was here yesterday, and Asaf Hamdani, we were all in the same classroom. Even our dean, Shai Blank, he was in the vicinity, but he was not allowed to enter the room. But we were there, and I remember Louis saying the following, which deserves critique, and I'm not sure that Barak would remember that, because those days, Barak had a young baby, and he brought her with him to class. And most of the time she was quiet, she was listening to Pablo and Chavel, she was very interested. Now I heard that she's in college already. So time flies, but for once in a while, she started crying, she stepped out of the room, so maybe you didn't hear what I'm going to
I was tired that whole year anyway.
So,
maybe it's good for you.
those were the days in which the first papers in law economics that came into the room with behavioral assumptions. And so there was this bias and that bias, and Lewis was very suspicious. And he told us, every week something new is coming. Someone invented a bias, and with this new tricks we can prove anything that we want. And this is such a mess, and there is such a garden variety of new biases that I'd rather stick to the old faithful rationality assumption. So this was his. I'm not sure that he believes in that anymore, but this was the suspicion way that law and economics looked at all these matters, and currently how that they're used so often. So there is room for this criticism or demands. But nevertheless, I want to say a few words about Carnegie Mellon, who were celebrated in Barak's paper as well as the place where good, rich analysis was conducted. And I don't know too much about this place, but I know of two famous economists that came out of that place, which are, Merton Miller and Franco Modigliani. They are famous, of course, Nobel laureates, and they came from that place, and they were among those who were celebrated. What is their most famous contribution? The most famous contribution is the irrelevance theorem. This is their contribution to the discussion of so-called capital structure of the firm. Capital structure of the firm is the discussion of the division of financing of the firm between debt, money comes from debt holders, and the equity, money that comes from shareholders. And the division of debt and equity is the issue of capital structure of the firm. And before Modigliani and Miller, people believed that each company had some ratio that is the golden ratio for it between equity and debt. And they came along and said that this financing decision or the equity structure of the firm is irrelevant, under certain assumptions, of course, is irrelevant to the value of the corporation. And when Miller came in 1990 to get the Nobel Prize, he gave a short address. He said, "Thank you, Mom and Pop, for bringing me here and raising me." And then he had to say a few words about his thesis, and he said the following. He said, "Well, it doesn't matter how you cut your pizza; it is still the same pizza." This was his argument. And what does it mean? It means that the pizza, the value of the pizza or the value of the corporation is based on its assets. It's based on its business opportunity. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. So if it's funded by equity or debt, it doesn't change the value of the corporation, which is the value of what's in it. And this is like a paraphrase over a joke by the famous Yogi Berra, the baseball coach, who told his assistant one day that he needs him to cut the pizza to 12 instead of 6 pieces because he was very hungry that day. And 2 minutes. So this is young Yogi and old Yogi. Pay attention, he's wearing the same New York shirt and still in good shape after 50 years. So this was the irrelevance theorem, and I'm sure that Young and Miller thought those days that they were meeting Oliver's demands, but people came and criticized them. And one famous criticism is based on Jensen McLean. This is Paul Jensen when he got some prize. And he wrote this famous 1976 paper that started a huge literature about agency cost. But when they wrote their paper, they didn't think that they were inventing a new theory. They had no clue what would happen from it. They actually thought that they are contributing to the ongoing discussion about capital structure, and they had a criticism of the irrelevance theorem. And I'm not going to use their terminology. I'm going to be very short. But they looked at this puzzle, this pizza puzzle, And I think they had a reflection, at least from a lawyer's point of view. I'm going to say the following. So their criticism is that, Modigliani and Miller didn't understand anything, because equity and debt are not only two different ways to finance the firm, but those are two different types of contracts. And contracts create incentives, and if with different contracts we have different incentives. Once you use equity or you use debt, different incentives would come out. So if you use debt, when what you will see is that the directors that are elected by the shareholders would start to take additional risks. Why? Because the downside is borne by the debt holders, the upside goes especially to the shareholders, so they will take more risks. And with more risky projects, with these incentives, with more risky projects, the value of the firm would not stay the same. So the idea is that we are just cutting our pizza, can't be right, and this is, of course, became a very famous paper, and their terminology is now used for many things. So surely this is like a criticism of Merton, Miller, and Franco Modigliani that meets Oliver Williamsons criteria, the three criteria that I mentioned. What is the takeaway from this exercise? I think that good, rich analysis, realistic analysis, existed much long before 1990 or 1997 when Oliver Williamson made his address, and it happened everywhere. It didn't happen only in CMU. It happened elsewhere in the U.S. and across the world. And I'm sure we'll see good papers and bad papers throughout the history. My own personal lesson is that I should be more critical when I do my own analysis. So thank you.